tea, a simple drink that many of us sip every single day. But did you know that this innocent beverage once led to a devastating war? Britain's thirst for tea became the spark for one of the most infamous conflicts in history, the Opium Wars. This is the story of how a cup of tea pulled empires into battle, shaped global trade, and left lasting scars on China. In the 17th and 18th centuries, tea wasn't just a drink. In Britain it was an obsession. By the 1800s, millions of pounds of Chinese tea were being shipped to London every year. Tea became part of daily life. From royal palaces to ordinary households, everyone wanted it. But there was one major problem. China controlled the tea trade. The Qing dynasty demanded that foreigners pay in silver. Britain was hooked on tea, but China wasn't interested in British goods like wool or machinery. The result was a massive trade imbalance that drained Britain's silver reserves. To solve this problem, Britain turned to something dangerous: opium. Grown in British-controlled India, opium was smuggled into China on a massive scale. It was highly addictive, and by the early 1800s, millions of Chinese people were dependent on the drug. Silver began flowing back to Britain, but at a terrible cost. Opium addiction spread like wildfire, crippling Chinese society, damaging the economy, and even weakening the military. The Chinese government realized the devastation and tried to fight back. In 1839, Emperor Daoguang sent Commissioner Lin Zexu to Canton with a mission: stop the opium trade once and for all. Lin even wrote a famous letter to Queen Victoria, questioning why Britain would poison another nation for profit. He never received a reply. Instead, he seized and destroyed more than 20,000 chests of opium worth millions. It was a bold act, but one that set the stage for war. Britain claimed its trade rights had been violated. In reality, it was about protecting profits. That same year, British warships arrived, and the First Opium War began. China's military was no match for Britain's modern navy and weapons. After 3 years of fighting, China was defeated and forced to sign the Treaty of Nanking in 1842. The terms were humiliating. China had to open multiple ports to British traders, pay a massive indemnity, and hand over Hong Kong. But worst of all, the opium trade continued. Tensions didn't end there. A decade later, Britain and, this time, France, to launch the Second Opium War. Once again, Western firepower crushed Chinese resistance. Even Beijing itself was invaded, and the Summer Palace, a symbol of Chinese culture and pride, was looted and burned. The new treaties legalized opium, opened even more ports, and handed foreign powers greater control over Chinese trade and territory. The Opium Wars left China deeply weakened. The Qing dynasty lost authority, foreign powers carved out spheres of influence, and the country entered what's often called the Century of Humiliation. For Britain, however, tea and opium had secured economic dominance, at least for a time, but the moral cost was immense. Millions in China suffered from addiction, while Britain's global reputation was stained by greed. So, how did tea cause a war? The answer is Britain's endless craving for Chinese tea created a trade imbalance. To fix it, they turned to opium, which led to addiction, resistance, and ultimately, war. Tea wasn't just a drink. It was the spark that ignited one of history's clearest examples of economic imperialism. Today, when you sip your tea, it's hard to imagine that this peaceful drink once fueled global conflict. But history reminds us that even the simplest things, like a cup of tea, can change the fate of nations. The story of the Opium Wars is a lasting lesson about trade, power, and the human cost of greed.